Us right now is one of the conferees, Senator Gregg. He's a member of the Banking Committee. And Senator, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about this morning, but front and center, what's going on with this conference today with financial regulation? Big question was what was going to happen to the derivatives portion of that after Senator Lincoln's situation where she was brought back in. Where do you think things stand?
Well, first off, we're going to get a bill today. We'll get a bill laid down, which will be a merger of the Senate bill, with the Senate bill being most of it, and some additions from Congressman Frank. That bill, as it's laid down, will probably be pretty close to the final product. That's the way conferences work. When the two chairmen lay down a bill, it doesn't get changed too much. The issue of derivatives is a huge issue. I think the present bill, the Senate bill, which has the Lincoln language in it, will cause a massive contraction in credit in this country because it's a totally inoperable, in my opinion, approach to derivatives. And it doesn't face up to the reality of how derivatives should be managed, which is more clarity, more margin, more liquidity, but allow for reasonable exemptions for commercial activity, put people on clearing houses, but make sure those clearing houses are robust. But don't spin off the swap desk, because that will essentially create a contraction.
Judd, it's unfortunate that you don't see the bigger picture here, but Senator Lincoln was able to win to get the nomination with that in there, which gives her, if it stays, a better chance of winning overall. So you apparently can't see the forest through the trees. It's very important that this stay in there for her political future. So get on board. I don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. This is important.
I will not accept cynicism, Joe, at this hour of the morning. It's just not acceptable to me.
Sarcasm is a domain for losers. You're right. I take it back. I take it back, because I'm a winner. I want to be a winner. All right. That's all I want. You are not on board. You don't understand.
No, I'm not on board.
Very important.
That is accurate.
Huh?
that is true. I am not on board. We've got a real concern here, in my opinion. As this bill moves forward in its present form, you're going to see a really significant contraction in credit in this country, not only because of the derivatives language, but you've also got the capital requirements in this bill, which are totally irrational. I mean, it really doesn't make any sense. You're going to have a fair number of middle-sized banks which will be put under arbitrary pressure because they can't count trust preferred stock as basically part of their capital, and you may see if some of them go out of business. You've got initiatives in the consumer area which are going to contract credit. There's all sorts of unintended consequences which are pretty obvious, which is that you're going to cause an economic slowdown as a result of not having credit available. The great genius of the American economy is that if you're an entrepreneur, you're a risk taker, and you want to go out and take some risk, you can usually find capital and credit in this country. It's going to be a lot harder after this bill passes.
The derivatives issue was something that you're arguing against. The administration didn't want. Barney Frank didn't want.
Why the FDIC doesn't want.
The FDIC doesn't want. I think Bernanke's come out against it. Why do you think that it's going to go through?
Well, it's like the bad cousin that won't go away at the wedding. I mean, it just keeps hanging around. Everybody knows it's really bad.
It worked in the primary. It worked in the primary. It's the only thing that might save the election.
Senator,
there are actually some folks around here who believe it will work. There are literally some people. There are truly people around here. First off, most of the people who subscribe to this, in my opinion, don't believe in capital markets. They don't believe in markets generally, and they certainly dislike profit. And they basically directed in the view of, well, the government should have more direct control on all sorts of segments of our economy, but especially in the financial area. And they see this as a way to break up the capacity of larger institutions to control the derivatives markets. Well, in doing that, they're essentially going to contract the derivatives market, so there won't be adequate capital behind these spun-off swap desks. And you will actually end up, in my opinion, with significantly less oversight and soundness in the system because you will have spun these desks off.
That's a worse reason than I gave you, Judd.
Senator, when are we going to do something about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac?
That's inexcusable. That's not in this bill. There are two things that aren't in this bill that absolutely should have been in the bill. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we offered an amendment on the floor to do this, myself and Senator McCain, at least bring it on budget so American people know they got a $500 billion liability here that is already basically booked against the American taxpayer, and we ought to be accounting for it. And secondly, we should figure out a way to basically wind them down as publicly supported entities. Secondly, there are no significant underwriting standards in this bill. And when you look at the problems that generated this meltdown, one of the three major problems was the fact that we divorced underwriting standards from the actual activity of creating these instruments. And as a result, you created all this massive disruption because you had a lot of, it became an inverted pyramid where you had this loan down here that was based off a value that didn't exist for the loan that was being made, and the person who was supposed to pay the loan back was never checked for whether they could pay it back, especially when the interest rates reset. We need to correct that problem. It's not in this bill at all. This bill really ignores the core problems and takes on other issues, and some of them it doesn't take on in such a great way, like derivatives.
Thanks for your service.
Yeah. Senator, it's great to see you. And
always great to see you, Becky.
Come back soon, okay?
I wish I could say the same for Joe. It's always great to see Becky.
Senator,
David.
Tea Party and net positive or net negative? I can't get Walker to say it. Net positive or net negative?
Oh, it's absolutely a net positive. It's raising the visibility on the issue of fiscal responsibility.
Non-partisan. All right.
He did say net positive. All right.
It's unbelievable.
Senator, thank you. We'll see you soon.